Imagine if you had to celebrate your birthday, the New Year's Eve, and every possible festival all in one day. Sounds exhausting, right? What if we did that for elections? Welcome to the world of one nation, one election, an idea that challenges the very core of our political fabric. And make no mistake, this isn't about a logistical feat. It raises severely profound questions about our democracy itself. Can the unity of a synchronized nation truly reflect the voice of our people? Or does it risk diluting the very federal structure of this country? As we explore this extremely ambitious proposal, the larger question is beyond a change of electoral dates. It is about the rhythm and the melody of democracy. Will this unified, synchronized electoral process bring us closer to the idea of one nation, or will it further pull us apart? Ladies and gentlemen, this is What a Week, your weekly current affairs presentation, doing a 360 degrees on a contemporary issue, giving you nothing but closure because no one else will. Through this video, I'll be answering 8 fundamental questions. Question 1. What is one nation, one election? Question 2. How does it even fit into our syllabus? Question 3. Why are we discussing it now? Question 4. Has this happened before in India? Question 5. A thematic analysis of should we or shouldn't we go ahead with one nation, one election? Question 6. Does this happen anywhere else in the world? Question 7. If we have to do this, what do we need to do legally? And finally, question 8. The way forward. What is one nation, one election? In its simplest form, the idea of one nation, one election is to conduct elections to 4 institutions almost at the same time. These institutions are the Lok Sabha, the state legislative assemblies, panchayats, and municipalities. What one nation, one election does not include are indirect electoral processes, such as elections to the Rajya Sabha or even elections to state legislative councils. This is because they are indirect elections, and in indirect elections, the people don't directly participate. The representatives that we choose further participate in the election of the members of the Rajya Sabha and the state legislative councils. How does this fit in our syllabus? The story starts with GS paper 2. And under GS paper 2, under the polity section, the topics such as Parliament and State Legislature, Representation of People's Act are explicitly correlated to the idea of simultaneous elections. In addition to this, topics such as the Election Commission of India, electoral reforms, and federalism will also have a reference to simultaneous elections. In GS paper 1, while answering questions on women and caste empowerment, the impact of simultaneous elections on these vulnerable sections is a matter of noteworthy discussion. In GS paper 4, a classic debate in a classic topic, do the means justify the ends. Simultaneous elections is a means towards an end, and it could be used as a beautiful example to solve a larger utilitarian problem. Why are we even discussing it now? The immediate story starts in September 2023. That's when the then government appointed a high level committee under the leadership of none other than the ex President of India, Shri Kovind. The purpose of this committee was to look into the feasibility of simultaneous elections. This committee comprised of many a stalwart. India's most famous constitutional lawyer, Shri Harish Salve, was a part of this committee. He was accompanied by a very popular constitutional writer, Shri Subhash Kashyap. In September 2024, the recommendations of this committee were accepted by this Union Cabinet. This committee positively recommended simultaneous elections. And not only this, it also recommended a legal course of action to implement it. While one nation's one election has been recommended in 2024, it is very interesting to note that almost every government agency has been in favor of it, whether it's the Law Commission, Parliamentary Standing Committees, the Niti Aayog, the National Commission to Review the Constitution, and in fact, the Election Commission of India. There have always been positives for one nation, one election. Has it happened before? You'd be surprised to know that India had simultaneous elections from 1951 till 1967. We were born with simultaneous elections. Due to the premature dissolution of a few state legislative assemblies in 1968 and in 1969, this cycle of simultaneous elections was disrupted for the very first time. In 1970, the fourth Lok Sabha was itself dissolved prematurely, and that led to fresh elections in 1971. The term of the fifth Lok Sabha was extended till 1977 because Article 352 was invoked, which allows for the extension of the Lok Sabha indefinitely during a national emergency. And since then, there have been many subsequent instances where the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies have lost their cycles. And the rest, as they say, is history. Now, while simultaneous elections has happened in the past, it was not necessarily a matter of choice, but just how we started. So, the one thing as rational souls we must always remember that just because it happened in the past does not justify for it to happen in the present. We must critically analyze one nation, one election as a policy independently on its own merits. In fact, even today, along with Lok Sabha elections, elections to Andhra Pradesh, Arunachal Pradesh, Odisha, and Sikkim are simultaneously held. It's not an alien concept. The question is it something that we must adopt nationally? Thematic analysis on a question of whether we should or we shouldn't go ahead with one nation, one election. To answer this question thematically, I will be covering five principal grounds. We'll start with the cost factor, move to implications on security, thirdly, governance and administrative impact, fourthly, the federal angle, and fifthly, the larger issue of political parties. Let's begin with cost. To understand this categorically, Let's look at a simple question. Who bears the cost? The Indian 2024 Lok Sabha general election was the most expensive election in the history of the country. In fact, it was the most expensive election in the world. It is estimated that the total election expenditure was beyond 1.25 lakh crores. And even if the ECI has spent about 10 to 15% of this, that is still a staggering 20,000 crores. Let's go back to the basics. It is the government of India which bears 100% of the cost of a Lok Sabha election and 50% of the cost of a state legislative assembly election. State governments in India bear 50% of the cost of their state legislative assembly elections and 100% of the costs of their local elections. These local elections are either municipality elections or panchayat elections. So, one of the most important aspects of one nation, one election is the cost factor. So, if you decide to go ahead with simultaneous elections, you are drastically going to reduce the costs. The question is how? One, you will have lesser polling stations. Two, you will have lesser EVM machines that will have to be procured. Three, you will save a truckload on printing different electoral materials like voter slips, ID cards, ballot papers, result sheets. You will also save immensely on human costs, and you will also save up on lower transportation of police and other electoral personnel. Various estimates effectively state that by going forward with one nation, one election, you can reduce election expenditures by at least 25 to 40%. This potentially means a savings of 7.5 to 10,000 crores. And this is per general election cycle. Now, having said that, there are enough counter arguments to this. Number one, if you hold all elections together, do you have enough infrastructure for it? Now, while the COVID committee was looking into this, the Election Commission submitted certain documents to the COVID committee. It said that it will require 8,000 crores more to be prepared for 2029 simultaneous elections if they were to happen. But if you think about it, it is still a one time cost. It will still balance itself when it comes to economies of scale. And it's not just about 8,000 crores. It's about also ensuring that the two manufacturers of our voting equipments, the Bharat Electronics Limited and the Electronics Corporation of India Limited, have enough time to manufacture EVMs, ballot machines, VVPATs, and so on and so forth. But in toto, we can safely say, as far as cost is concerned, it favors one nation, one election. The second aspect, security and the deployment of law enforcement. What generally happens is during elections, the key security forces that are involved belong to the Central Armed Police Forces. They include the CRPF, the BSF, the CISF, the ITBP, and the SSP. Not only this, in many cases, state police battalions and even the home guards are invoked. In the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, a total of 4,719 companies of the CAPF were deployed. This was more than 50% as used in the 2019 elections. So, if you have synchronized elections, their transportation costs are reduced, the costs because of their temporary accommodations are reduced. You also have to spend less on polling duty allowance. You also have to save costs when you have to spend less on specific security equipment like anti mine vehicles, communication gear, and also you save big on the training of security personnel. Estimates suggest that you could save another 10 to 15% on election expenses if it is done through the synchronous route. Having said that, there is a larger counter argument. If elections all across the country happen at the same time, you would require a very heavy deployment of security forces, which means if the security forces are completely occupied helping in the conducting of elections, does it leave a larger security risk? This question still remains unanswered. But on the face of it, it does help security forces. The third aspect is the impact on governance and administration. Take, for instance, the Model Code of Conduct, the MCC. Though non statutory in nature, once MCC is imposed, no new schemes or initiatives can be announced. On an average, India witnesses 5 to 7 state elections in a year. In fact, a lot of times because of frequent electoral hurdles, states continue to be in a state of perpetual elections, whether it is Lok Sabha, assemblies, or local government. In fact, the state of Maharashtra once was under MCC for 300 days out of 365 in a year, which means for 300 days in Maharashtra, no new scheme could be announced. The MCC is prohibitive in nature for all the right reasons. Because of the Model Code of Conduct, even national programs like the Swachh Bharat in 2014 and the Ayushman Bharat in 2019 were to be delayed. And Ayushman Bharat, as you know, is the world's largest state sponsored medical coverage program. What happens because of states being in a constant electioneering mode is the focus on short term populism as opposed to long term reforms. And this also leads to policy inconsistency because your policies are linked to electoral results. And therefore, frequent electioneering is effectively dangerous for administration, for governance, and for welfare. And the idea is there is no empirical study linking simultaneous elections to better institutional stability. In principle, the idea of synchronized elections does seem to support the idea of better welfare and vice versa. The fourth aspect of simultaneous elections is its impact on federalism. See, what happens is the entire concept of simultaneous elections keeps the center at the center. The state legislative assemblies have to be tuned as per the schedule of the Lok Sabha. This, by the very nature of it, is unitary. The impact of simultaneous elections on federalism is one of the strongest arguments against simultaneous elections. Firstly, state specific issues such as droughts, flood, agrarian distress, local economic conditions, they will tend to get neglected. Surveys have shown that people have a tendency to vote for a national party if elections happen simultaneously or happen too close. Distinct regional factors and sentiments that affect voter priorities are never clearly showcased. In fact, this can also lead to lesser accountability of state governments during simultaneous elections. And therefore, voters get an extremely negligible opportunity to truly evaluate the performance of the state governments. In fact, simultaneous elections are touted to favor national parties, which is why you will notice that leaders of almost every regional party in this country, unless they're in the current political alliance, tend to disagree with the idea of one nation, one election. But having said that, there's nothing more unpredictable than Indian politics. Take the case of Delhi. The same people of Delhi vote for the Lok Sabha in the favor of the BJP. And the same people of Delhi in the state assembly elections vote for a regional party called the Aam Aadmi Party. That truly nothing is as exciting as an Indian election. So there are two sides to the coin. But in essence, simultaneous elections are questionable on the federal front. And the story doesn't end here. Because simultaneous elections are to also cover local elections, and local elections fall completely within the domain of state governments, it crosses a constitutionally demarcated federal line. So, therefore, conducting Lok Sabha and state assembly elections does entail a very strong list and a very strong risk of overarching national issues. But since we are not sure of any empirical evidence, we cannot be absolutely certain that federalism will be lost because of simultaneous elections. The next aspect of simultaneous elections is perhaps the most important aspect, the impact that it has on us citizens, on us voters. Let's understand this. The sheer logistical hassle of getting out and voting every time for every election is taxing. India has a 95 crore strong voter base, traveling to booths, waiting in long lines, eventually, election after election, multiple times in a year, leads to what is called voter fatigue, voter apathy, voter indifference. And when political parties continue with sheer electioneering, it hinders substantial work, which also demotivates us voters from going out there and voting. If there is election, there is a campaign. If there is a campaign, there is rhetoric. Constant political rhetoric, negative politics is the breeding ground for cynicism. And this cynicism leads to a larger loss of faith in our electoral process. And from a logistical standpoint, elections lead to the closure of schools, lead to disruptions of normal lives, leads to loss of mandates, which can also have an adverse impact on us citizens. And because the model code of conduct is generally applicable, a lot of the initiatives also get stuck in limbo. Now, what happens because of this is voters are stuck in the middle of nothing. Now, that is why its impact on voters must be very carefully understood. And this is why the voters must be at the center of it all when you're looking at their impact or them as the final beneficiaries in the electoral process. Factors such as anti incumbency, political accountability, multi party democracy, regional aspirations, they're all centered around voter behavior. And voter behavior takes a very strong hit because of multiple elections. The last thematic aspect of simultaneous elections is the impact on political parties, the custodians of parliamentary democracy. Simultaneous elections would surely lead to lesser costs being borne by political parties. They spend thousands and thousands of crores on ads, on media, on billboards, on promotional material, on call centers, on instigating cadres, and so on and so forth. These can be saved and therefore can be used to better use, such as strengthening grassroots democracy, initiatives that build parties from inside, innovations in the way they drive campaigns, focusing on candidate selections, the right messaging, and a charting of a good policy course. So, political parties in the long run will tend to be benefited from simultaneous elections. Of course, regional political parties don't agree with this for federal reasons. But the idea per se seems to be in favor of what are called political parties. No doubt, there is a domination of a national party over a regional party. But in the longer run, it is good for the health of the democracy of India. There are chances that the narrative will be monopolized. There are chances where voters will have to take very discerning decisions when elections standing apart. There are chances that smaller regional parties will be compelled to look into national issues. But there are also chances that national parties will also have to advocate regional issues. The glass could be half empty or half full, depends on how you look at it. But political parties must not be ignored as stakeholders for simultaneous elections. Does it happen anywhere else in the world? See, the practice of conducting simultaneous elections in some form or another happens in different countries of the world. What is it? A lot of these countries are presidential democracies. Democracies where elections are conducted for the office of the president and the legislatures together. These countries are Brazil, Colombia, Philippines, and so on and so forth. Even in countries like South Africa and Sweden, sometimes simultaneous elections are conducted for national and provincial elections. On the Asia front, Indonesia, which is the world's third largest democracy after the US and India, also has started conducting simultaneous elections. So we do have enough reference points in the world. However, their geographies are different, their population sizes are different, their issues are different, their manpower requirements are different. But in principle, we do have inspiration to take some idea from. So, how do we go about it? The answer to this is very simple. At the time of the next election to the Lok Sabha, all state assemblies and local governments should stand dissolved. It doesn't matter whether a significant amount of term is pending or not. However, this should be done as a one time measure so that all bodies are on the same plane. Now, the high powered committee has recommended that all Lok Sabha and state assembly elections should be conducted at the same time. And then, in the second phase, within 100 days, local government elections should be conducted. Now, if at all there is a hung legislature in any state, in that scenario, an election can be conducted but only for the remainder term. Which means if, let us say, a state assembly gets dissolved in the second year, then the new elections would be done for a new government to only be in power for 3 years. This is the larger premise. Now comes the tough part. How do you constitutionally make this work? For this, you will require three sets of bills to be passed. Out of these three bills, two bills are going to be constitutional amendments. The first constitutional amendment would deal with making provisions for holding Lok Sabha and state legislative assembly elections simultaneously. This constitutional amendment bill, which requires for simultaneous elections of the Lok Sabha and the assemblies, will not require state ratification. And this is as per the understanding of Article 368. So, what will you amend in this particular amendment? One, you will amend Article 82A by adding a subclause, which will add the word appointed date. It will also add another subclause to Article 82A to end the terms of the Lok Sabha and the assemblies together. It also seeks to amend Article 83 Clause 2 and insert two new subclauses, 82 Clause 3 and 82 Clause 4. This relates to the duration and the dissolution of the Lok Sabha. This amendment bill will also have provisions regarding the dissolution of legislative assemblies. It shall also amend Article 327 to introduce the term simultaneous elections. Now, this bill will not require a state ratification. However, the second constitutional amendment bill that will require state ratification because it is going to deal with state affairs. And Article 368 is categorically clear with respect to state ratification for federal impact. Now, let's understand this. The second constitutional amendment bill will amend constitutional provisions relating to the preparation of electoral rolls. These electoral rolls will be prepared both by the Election Commission and the state election commissions as the state stands today. Simultaneous elections will require a single common electoral roll. That can only be possible through a constitutional amendment providing for a singular national electoral roll, which will require a state ratification constitutional amendment. It will also insert new provisions to host simultaneous elections to municipalities and panchayats, along with assemblies and the Lok Sabha. This can only be done by inserting an article called Article 324A to the parent article. And since local self government is in the state list, it has a federal impact. The third law that needs to be passed will not be a constitutional amendment. In fact, it will be an ordinary bill. And this ordinary bill will look at regulating elections in three union territories that have legislatures: Delhi, Pondicherry, and J&K. This will be passed by a straight, simple majority, but the laws that would need to be amended would be the National Capital Territory of Delhi Act 1991, the Government of Union Territories Act of 1963, and the J&K Reorganization Act of 2019. So, simultaneous elections will require one of the most significant constitutional amendments that have ever happened in this country till date. There is a larger question. Is this the only way to do this? Another model, which is often recommended by various experts, is a midpoint between asynchronous elections and synchronous elections. What if you could follow a US system where national elections happen every 5 years and invariably state elections happen every 2.5 years? Another option is that you could have elections in two phases, wherein a separate set of elections for the Lok Sabha and a separate set of common elections for the state legislative assemblies. There is also another option: conduct elections to the Lok Sabha and those assemblies which are to be dissolved within a year of the Lok Sabha's tenure, and conduct elections to the rest of the assemblies separately. There are many ways to go about this, but this is more of a principled agreement than an implementation one, which therefore brings me to the way forward. Simultaneous elections is one of those rare issues of our country which have two dimensional questions that need to be answered. One, should you do it? And two, how should you? And whenever there's a conflict between principle and policy, always remember, if principally you agree to simultaneous elections, figuring out a way to do this is a matter of time. The problem isn't how you do it. The real issue is should you and how. Therefore, if democracy is about people and people are all about consensus, the true strength of simultaneous elections lies in how inclusively does that decision get taken. Regional parties, voters, the administration, machinery, security personnel, everybody should be on board with this idea. Only then the true impact in the good sense will be realized. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.